we're doing the top 50 indie games of the decade. So these are my picks, of course, so I'm not picking something just because it's super popular or it has a lot of cultural importance or something. These are essentially the games I enjoyed most over the decade, and it is indie games, so that means we're not including like Dark Souls or Portal 2, for example, but indie games already would have been about 85 to 90% of this list for me anyway. Like, I looked at several other top lists of the decade and stuff, and I've got about 20 games on my list that don't appear on any other list that I've seen, so some interesting picks that aren't going to come up that often in other lists. I have also paired music with each entry in the list here, and I'll encourage everyone to guess along as we go for what game they think the music is paired with. I decided to only include music for games that like felt like the music had a distinct connection to the game for me. So there's a few games that do have music, but like the music doesn't evoke the game at all to me. So instead, I just picked some appropriate non-game music for those games. It's a little bit music puzzle quiz because I'll try to give a little delay before announcing the game to give people a chance to guess what they think the game is. And finally, I will note that I have not played Night in the Woods, What Remains of Edith Finch, Firewatch, Gone Home, Florence, Journey, or Disco Elysium. Those are all games that have appeared on multiple people's other best lists of the decade and stuff, but I haven't played any of those games, so I have no opinion on Night in the Wood, What Remains of Edith Finch, Firewatch, God Home, Florence, Journey, and Disco Elysium as of yet, but I'll probably eventually play at least most of those. And yeah, so without further ado, how about? Number 50. This is Concrete Jungle, a deck builder plus city building game, and it is pretty interesting. It's one I only played this year, and it just has a really kind of satisfying combination of those unusual elements of deck building and kind of city building, and it ends up going into a kind of competitive city building, which is also just kind of a interesting concept that ended up being a lot of fun too. And yeah, it's just a really fun concept that I felt worked well and I enjoyed quite a bit. And next we have gotta have some of the music a little more intense too, right? The Void Rains Upon Her Heart. This is a bullet hell shmup roguelike, so lots of just not back-to-back boss fights in a shoot-'em-up sort of situation, and you've got a little bit of a roguelike progression over the course of the run where you pick up various different power-ups, so each run feels a little bit different because you get different items and stuff each run, and yeah, it's got a solid shmup mechanics and some nice little roguelike addition to it, some good music, and additionally the difficulty really worked well for me. Like, it was kind of in the middle ground for a bullet hell where it didn't feel like too hard or too easy. like kind of hit that sweet spot for me. And just a cool game with a cool name, and devs actively working on it and making it better. And number 48 is Dicey Dungeons. So this is a dice-based roguelike game that came out this year, and well, came out fully this year. This music's distinctive. It varies, but yeah, Chipsel style is pretty distinct for sure. The thing that is kind of different about Dicey Dungeons is that instead of kind of focusing on making a core game that is repeatable as a strong roguelike experience, it is more broken up into a bunch of individual episodes that change up the rules each time. So it is almost like a little like puzzle. It's like kind of in between roguelike and puzzle game, where each time you're kind of presented with a new set of rules, and you're trying to figure out how to best manipulate those rules and the equipment that you're offered to best handle the situation. And there's also a decent amount of depth and fun gameplay involved with some of the harder classes like Witch, and yeah, just had a lot of variety that was a lot of fun to play through. And if anyone's wondering, I did not script out all of the games, so it's mostly off of the cuff with occasional little notes here and there. All right, number 47. I believe is the only song in the list that has vocals. And this is from Cinders. So, Cinders is a downhill biking roguelike, technically. The roguelike element is kind of minor, but even as someone that's not super into most sports games in general, Cinders just offers an incredibly satisfying sense of momentum and speed as you're zipping down like super fast. And it's just a ton of fun to pull off some good tricks or actually survive through a bunch of nonsense. And yeah, I really liked that sense of speed that very few games can offer. And like I'm never gonna be like amazing at doing all the crazy stunts that I've seen some people pull off in it, but you can also play it fairly slow and still like enjoy it that way, where you're just trying to get through more like a roguelike sort of experience, and then you have to defeat the boss jumps of each area and stuff. And yeah, it was just a cool game, and executed well. Had a lot of fun with that one. This is not a song people will recognize from a game. So I had no distinct song from this game. Number 46 is The Swapper. The Swapper is a platforming puzzle game based on cloning yourself, essentially. And you have to use clones of yourself to position properly, because they will move with you to be able to put them in the right spots to solve various puzzles. And on top of that, you've got kind of a philosophical narrative layer kind of related to the fact that you're cloning yourself and all of that jazz. But the focus, as far as I'm concerned, was definitely the puzzles, and yeah, the puzzles were really strong, and one I still consider quite highly, even though it came out earlier in the decade. Number 45, I almost thought there wasn't a song that I found distinctive from it, but then I realized this song definitely evokes this game for me. This is number 45, Oxenfree. Oxenfree is a completely narrative-focused experience where you are some teenagers just having fun on an island, and things get weird. So it's got some pretty interesting kind of spook to it. It's got some really good voice acting. It has some pretty well executed kind of dialogue choice situation, more so like people actually seem to be reacting to the options you're choosing, unlike say Mass Effect or something where like what you're saying doesn't really come out quite how you want it to a lot of times. There was also like a really good emotional hit, at least for me, at the end of Oxenfree as well. That was quite nice. So that was it was a cool experience. And I don't have a song for number 44. This is the only itch.io exclusive on our countdown here. This is number 44, Which Way? So, Which Way is a short puzzle game that is really neat. Yeah, like they're eventually planning on making a kind of longer full version that they'll put up on Steam and stuff, I think, but you can get this on itch.io, and it's about a little witch that is like moving blocks around in a pretty neat way, and just a nice little short, simple, very satisfying puzzle game that I was glad to have stumbled across. Now, this is not no song. This one's a little tricky. If you know who composed this song, you have 2/3 of the name of the game in question. Number 43 is Johann Sebastian Joust. This is a little bit of a curveball pick. This is a game that's really only appropriate for large groups, like at a convention or whatever, but it is a lot of fun. The basic idea is that like each player has like a one of the Move controllers, like PlayStation Move controllers. So they're each like holding a Move controller out in front of them or whatever. And the idea is that you're trying to not move your thing too rapidly, so you're trying to be careful, because if it moves too rapidly, you're out, basically, while trying to make other players move their controllers too rapidly, so you kind of have a bit of a dance to it as you're like kind of ebbing and flowing, trying to keep yours not moving much while frantically moving your other hand to knock other players around. And there's different modes. There's like a team mode, which was my favorite, and just a great way to get a little bit of a workout while playing games at a convention, basically. It's a really cool game. It's not one that's going to be easy to find an ability to play for most people, but if you ever see a bunch of people like walking like dancing around with Move controllers at a convention, try to join them if you get a chance. It's a lot of fun. Alright. There was also no particularly distinct song from this game, and this is one that I played very early in the decade, so I don't necessarily know how much I would like it now, but number 42 is Dungeon Defenders. This is a cooperative tower defense game that just really offered a great co-op experience at the time that I played it. You have to kind of work together to try to place towers in the right spots to deal with the incoming swarms, as you do in tower defense games. While also there's also a first-person kind of shooter aspect to go along with it, where you can kind of fight enemies directly and fix up, add new turrets and stuff as enemies are coming in, and just trying to do that coordinating with a couple of friends at the same time, so you're all working together to stop things or patch holes as they're breaking through your defenses and stuff. And yeah, just ended up being a lot of fun and a really neat experience. All right. Give a moment to recognize the song, perhaps. It's probably easier once it hits the drop, but it's still reasonably distinct, I think. Number 41 is Electronic Super Joy. This is pretty much just a kind of pure, simple platformer. For most of the game, you just have a jump and a slam down attack, but it just controls super tightly and offers a really satisfying platforming experience. Good level design, and one that I even enjoyed speedrunning for a while. And yeah, that's mostly all there is to say about it. Just a really simple platformer that is executed very well. I guess I could say that I was actually originally put off a little bit by the playlist, the music for the game. Like, I thought it was gonna be like just too much, too dubsteppy or whatever for my taste, but I ended up really liking the soundtrack quite a bit for it. It definitely has some jams. Got another more intense song. I could have picked the title screen, which would maybe be more identifiable, but I think this is, anyone who knows the game could probably pick this one. This is number 40, Iconoclasts. So this is a light Metroidvania game that has a gorgeous visual aesthetic, some good tunes. Probably the most standout is kind of its unique and engaging narrative that has a little like kind of confusion and weird hiccups to it here and there, but overall is very interesting. And it also has some very satisfying boss fights, especially in the second half of it. And yeah, nice experience that took them, I believe it was about a decade to actually finish the game, so appropriate game to make a decade list, I suppose. And this is actually representing two games because it is my list and I make up the rules. So number 39 is Opus Magnum and Space Skim. These are definitely similar games in the Zachtronics field that even among Zachtronics games they play very similarly. I think if I were to like recommend one today, I would just recommend Opus Magnum. I think it's a kind of cleaner and a little bit smoother on the difficulty, so it's easier to get into and probably more palatable for most people. But I probably enjoyed Space Skim more at the time that it first came out. Yeah, these are programming puzzle games that just offer a lot of interesting challenges and are a lot of fun, and I think they definitely fall in that category of game that I think is well worth experiencing even if you never finish it. Like, I only played about half of Space Skim, and that was great. That was That was all I needed to, but I still really enjoyed my experience with it. Zachtronics refers to just the designer that makes a lot of programming puzzle games. Alright. This one's pretty identifiable. Number 38 is DokiDoki Literature Club. This is a perfectly normal, innocent visual novel with with nothing weird about it at all. That's all there is to say about that, right? So yeah, it's hard to get people interested in DokiDoki if that were the actual premise. So it's a visual novel that has some weird things going on that was quite the ride. Like, even though a lot of it I was kind of expecting in many cases, it still ended up being quite an interesting experience for me. We went in deep, analyzed the poetry in the game in depth, and like it also to some extent helped inspire me to write more poetry of my own. So it gets some credit there, and yeah, it was just a very unique experience, I would say. I would say number 37's music is also plenty distinct. Number 37 is To the Moon. This is a, I guess technically an adventure RPG, but basically a visual novel narrative sort of game about a dying man, and it is and you've been tasked with basically making his dream come true in his memories. So you kind of explore the whole history of this person, and kind of how they came to be in their current state and why they actually wanted their wish. And it has some missteps here and there where, like, I think it runs a little over long, but ultimately it's just really emotionally powerful experience that has a really strong story that every time I thought back on it, I kind of like smiled, and my kind of opinion of the game improved over time, and I just really like it. And one of multiple games on this list that have made me cry. Had some good music as well. This is a game I wasn't sure I was going to have a song for, because we have generally played this with playlist music, but number 36 is Crypt. This is a roguelike deck builder of sorts that came out well before some of the more recent incarnations of that idea. Essentially, you have a bag of coins that you get in fights with people, draw some coins out, throw your money at your enemies, and then get more money from them and from chests, and you're just kind of trying to balance not having too many bad cards in your deck, while still having enough coins, I should say, in your deck that you don't run out. And probably the thing that stood out most to me in Crypt was the variety of different classes you could play as. There's a huge number of different classes you can play as, and almost all of them feel very different to play. So it keeps things fresh, and yeah, keeps being a really enjoyable roguelike experience as you keep going with it. Number 35 is Titan Souls. This is a pure boss rush game, essentially. It's fairly unique in that bosses and you both pretty much just die in one hit. So you have a single arrow that you kind of shoot out, and you can like suck it back in, and you're trying to hit the boss's weak spot while staying alive. So you deal with a wide variety of bosses, and meanwhile it's got some really solid music. It's got nice little kind of open areas that you kind of just wander through that break up the pacing of the game that I found were really nice. Like gives you just a little brief respite between boss fights, and yeah, just really solidly executed series of boss fights. Music's a little more subtle, and this game is also one of the more obscure ones on the list. Probably not the most, but definitely one of the more obscure ones. Has some lovely music, has a nice visual aesthetic. Number 34 is A Walk in the Dark. This is a just a enjoyable platformer game. It in a lot of ways is kind of a worse Super Meat Boy and worse VVV, but that's okay because it's still really good. Is kind of where A Walk in the Dark lands. So it's probably not one that's going to like win you over if you don't like platformers, but for anyone that does like platforming games, it is a solid recommendation that is just a lot of fun to play as you basically play girl Ariel or her lost cat as you're trying to kind of reunite them. And the next one we do not have a song for. Number 33 is also 2 games. 33 is the well, it's actually 4 games technically. It's the Hexel series and Temitsi. So I decided to bundle Advanced Minesweeper all into one entry on the list here. But both of these games are taking the concepts of Minesweeper and making it more challenging, more interesting, more satisfying, while also having pre-constructed levels that never require guessing. Hexel's is kind of middle difficulty, and it was like really satisfying and a lot of fun. And then Temitsi came after that. That feels in some ways less polished, but it's also got an extra feature where your mines count down when you mark them. And that makes it actually really easy and fast to process the information once you get used to it, and I love that feature so much. And Temitsi also has a huge amount of content. We're something like 60 hours into it, and we've only done about 70% of the content of the game or something at this point. Temitsi definitely gets quite hard in the harder levels. You have to bust out some very unique and clever logic, but yeah, these games both take the basic concepts of Minesweeper and make it better. Make it better. Temitsi is spelled Tametsi. get a playful song for this game that doesn't really have any particularly distinctive songs to it. Number 32 is Dr. Leng the Tiger and the Terribly Cursed Emerald: a Whirlwind Heist. This is a very short little humor narrative game made by one of the Stanley Parable devs. It is free, and it is just really, really funny, and just a lot of fun that you can have in about an hour's time. So there's no reason not to play it, basically. Really, really fun experience. Can I repeat the name? Of course. That was Dr. Leng the Tiger and the Terribly Cursed Emerald: a Whirlwind Heist. And number 31 is The King's Bird. This is another platformer. I like platformers, it turns out. That has a nice, clean aesthetic, some good songs, and some neat little charms. Like you hear the like kind of humming along to the song here. Gameplay-wise, while you're like flying through the air, your character hums along to the music, so the music is a little dynamic in that way, and that's really neat. And what probably stood out the most about The King's Bird to me is that it did this thing where you think you understand the game and how the mechanics work, and you aren't necessarily given a new mechanic, but then you're presented with a platforming challenge that is just clearly impossible. Like it felt like a puzzle game like Snakebird or something, where you're presented with something like this is obviously impossible. What do you want from me? But it's a platformer, and you just figure out that, like, okay, I can actually do this impossible thing without getting any new abilities. And that was just a really cool experience that you almost never find in, like, a platforming game. So that was a really neat thing, and otherwise just a solid, enjoyable platformer overall. Now, this one, I think the majority of people watching can recognize. Number 30 is Bastion. Definitely a popular indie game, and for good reason. Has a gorgeous aesthetic, some fantastic music, some great narration by Logan Cunningham, and just a neat experience. Like, I think some of its other aspects, like the gameplay is good. It's not as standout as some of the other aspects, but the whole package together is really satisfying. Has some neat little backstory, and has a nice emotional kick at the end of the game as well. That was quite nice, and also has some neat little humor bits here and there as well, and it deserves its reputation. Bastion's a good game. This is gonna be a less recognizable pick for sure. I'll be curious if anyone knows this one. Number 29 is HalfMinute Hero. So the idea of HalfMinute Hero is that it's an RPG that you only have 30 seconds to complete the level in. So you end up bribing the goddess of time to keep extending the timer. And so you just like go through battles super fast, level up, like try to buy some equipment super fast, go bribe the goddess of time to reset the timer, and like each level was kind of its own little puzzle in a way. So you kind of just figured out how to best execute all of that. And it was also a lot of fun for me that it was set up well for speedrunning the levels, because everything was always seeded, so you didn't need to just rely on good like RNG for the enemy encounters or anything like that to have a good time. You just had to execute well or find a good path, so that was a nice idea. It also had some fun branching paths as well. So like you're kind of just going through this this map level by level and stuff, and eventually you might realize that like, oh, maybe I could have beaten that level in a different way. And if you do, it actually you've got two different paths out of the level if you beat it in different ways, and that was pretty neat to find too. And yeah, just a pretty unique idea that was executed really well and was a lot of fun. This is number 28, Battleblock Theater. As you can tell, probably by the song, it's a little bit silly, and it's a really funny game. Really, that's the standout by far. And I guess this song does have lyrics. That's true. That's true. I lied when I said the Cinders song was the only one with lyrics. But yeah, it's a cooperative platformer that can have a lot of silly interactions with each other as you complete the levels, trying to find the hidden areas and stuff like that. And all of that is, you know, serviceable. It's good. Like, it's a fun co-op game, but the standout more than anything else is the humor, which is just a lot of fun. Really humorous story that is executed well, and yeah, it's a really good experience. Yeah, some of the best cutscenes of any game, absolutely. Number 27 is a puzzle game called Fez. So Fez is a 2D platformer puzzle game, except that it's also 3D. The main mechanic of the game is kind of rotating what side of the 3D world you're viewing and manipulating in 2D, and it uses that idea to good effect. And it looks really nice. It has a couple of other utter nonsense puzzles in it that no mortal will ever solve of their own volition, but as long as you're okay with not getting 100%, you can enjoy all the rest of the puzzles, and they're really good and a lot of fun. I think those 2 seconds are pretty identifiable. This is number 26, Ori and the Blind Forest. Hey look, it's another platformer. So this is a Metroidvania game with gorgeous art. And I'm saying this as someone that in general doesn't really care that much about art in games. Like, that's not something that affects my experience of most games too terribly much, but just really, really gorgeous art, some lovely music, and some super satisfying sections of platforming, especially like what I would call the first escape sequence is just one of my favorite like little segments of gameplay of the whole decade, probably. I also found the narrative reasonably moving as well, so it hits well on a lot of different fronts, and it's a really good game. Next, we have number honorable mention. This was a little bit of a fake out, but this is essentially the section of why isn't blank on your list? These are games that I definitely enjoyed. I liked all of these games quite a bit, and they appear on a lot of other top lists, and I mostly feel I need to mention them because people will directly complain if they're not addressed in this list. So I liked all of these games, they just didn't quite make my top 50, I'm afraid. So that includes Hollow Knight, Obra Dinn, Into the Breach, Transistor, Dead Cells, Binding of Isaac Rebirth, Papers, Please, Cuphead, Rogue Legacy, Hyper Light Drifter, A Hat in Time, and Hotline Miami. So, all of those are good games. They didn't make the list. I'm sorry to everyone who loves those games. They all have good aspects. I liked all of those games, but didn't quite make my own top 50, I'm afraid. I still really love the City of Tears music, though. Absolutely. And now the actual number 25. Probably not too recognizable to most people, but we'll give it a moment and see if anyone happens to know. Number 25 is Long Live the Queen. This is a visual novel roguelike, essentially. Roguelike's a bit overstating it because you can save and reload if you would like to, but it is a visual novel where it is very easy to die a horrible death, I guess is probably a sufficient way to phrase that. You've got a variety of stats you can train up. Each like in between each like day or a week rather, and what really impressed me the most about this game is that there's a lot of different ways that the story can end up going. So like you might end up like directing your character so that you become a brutal tyrant, or you might like die in a sword fight, or like there's all sorts of different situations that can occur. I should cover the basic concept is that you are a young girl that her mother just died, so you're next in line for the throne, and you need to essentially survive long enough to last until your coronation. And in the meantime, you're making decisions both directly and on your stats to level up and stuff. So those vary from stuff like your more courtly skills like dancing or court manners and stuff like that, to various combat things like magic or sword skill, to various side things like deciphering codes or training falcons and stuff like that. And every skill does something. Some skills are certainly better than others, but to some extent that just makes sense. And like, if you're wasting your time training skills that like aren't important, you're probably gonna have a bad time. Another thing that was nice about Long Live the Queen is that when you failed a skill check, it popped up a little thing that said you failed that skill check. So you do have some idea about what to do in future runs if you want to do something different there. So you're not just doing it completely trial and error either. But overall, yeah, just a neat political narrative that can branch in a lot of different ways. So this game, I'm sure, has some music that people like from it, but I did not recognize any songs from the game because I think I actually ended up turning the music off in this game right away, so I don't recognize any of myself. This is one of the only competitive multiplayer games on the list. Number 24 is Rocket League. This is just car soccer. That is what it is. You're playing soccer with cars, and it just really works well. There's a whole slew of depth of skill available to this game. You can play it for many hundreds of hours and still not be anywhere near mastery of the game. And it, yeah, it's just a game that works, that's still fun, even if you're playing at a pretty low level, where you're just kind of barely moving around to touch the ball and hoping to tap it into a goal, or if you're playing at a high level and you're flying through the air, dunking the ball down on opponents. Like, it's just a really cool game that works well with friends or just playing solo, and yeah, just a really good competitive experience. Next one, probably pretty identifiable. Number 23 is Celeste. This is the 8th platformer on the list so far, and spoiler alert, it's not the last one. It's just a really well-executed platformer all the way around. It has clean platforming with a really smooth difficulty curve. It's got a heartfelt story. It's got a lot of little bits of charm and polish, where, for example, there's even like unique screen wipes for each when you die in each different area of the game. You see your little character like breathing out fog in the cold areas and stuff like that. There's just a lot of little subtle polish like that, and just a moving story, and one that's also impactful for a lot of people, and just really solid platforming that at a base level is reasonably obtainable by most players, but then there's also the extra hard bonus challenges for the people that really love that kind of stuff. And some really good music as well. I think this music style is pretty distinct. Number 22, Baba Is You. This game is too hard. It is incredibly clever. This is a puzzle game where the rules of a given level are shown on the level, but you can push around and change the rules of the level and need to do so in order to complete the level. And it is just a really, really clever game that I think is well worth experiencing, even if you only end up playing like 20% of it or something like that. And just a really satisfying puzzle experience that you don't get too many games that feel this amount of clever. We'll put it that way. This is possibly the most unusual pick on the list. This is number 21, Chimera Destroy All Monster Girls. This is a platformer that I basically think of it as what Shovel Knight would look like as a free game. Just really fun, just like raw fun game that you are a chimera with a golem arm that goes around punching through the levels, and there's some fun little humor in the background as well. And like it's just kind of hard to say that anything further. It was just a lot of fun. I enjoyed the music quite a bit. I was having a good enough time playing this game that I like bought the little bonus DLC that's just there to help support the developer, like in the middle of my first playthrough of it. And yeah, just a really fun free platformer that I really enjoyed. Next up. Number 20. Slay the Spire. This is the best deck building roguelike. That is pretty much mostly what needs to be said about it. This is a game that has a really good, satisfying amount of depth to it. It has a really well executed quality of life that even on a very first time playing the game, you can kind of hover over items you get and enemies and stuff and have a pretty good idea what's happening even on your very first play. So there's not a whole lot of obtuse trial and error, but despite that, you still have all of this depth. Like, there's a huge difference between a new player and an experienced one, and even many of the best players still disagree about how to go about various situations, and just a really good execution of the combination of deck building and roguelike ideas. And for something very different, we have our second competitive multiplayer game on the list. Number 19 is Speedrunners. So Speedrunners is if Mario Kart were a platformer, basically. That's kind of the short of it. You are racing ideally 3 other players and trying to keep a lead in the level. You pick up various items a la Mario Kart. You've got a grappling hook. You've got obstacles on each level to avoid. It also has a workshop support for some custom levels, but most of the pre-designed levels are really solid, and I just have a grin on my face every time I play this. That it's just always a lot of fun. Number 18, the Stanley Parable. Probably its most standout aspect is the humor. You've got a glorious narration of the entire experience as you're exploring what it's like to be in a game and be told about being in a game, and exploring the nature of games and of choice in games. And that sort of commentary is present, and I think it's interesting, but even without that, you still got kind of a core aspect of almost a puzzle aspect where you're trying to find all the different endings, and while you're doing that, you're also really enjoying the humor of the game all the way through. So just a really cool game that even has a unique demo. The demo is completely separate content from the game, and it was originally a mod before it was its own full game, and that's also completely unique and has its own content as well. So just a really cool, funny game that is silly and praise the adventure lad. And number 17 is next. This is Cloud Belt and Super Cloud Belt. This is a third-person 3D parkour sort of experience, and it is just fun. Like, running around in this game, like jumping off of walls, climbing up stuff, flying around, like, it's just really well executed and just an extremely satisfying parkour kind of experience. In some levels you can combine that with like having to shoot enemies and deal with that. Other levels just more pure parkour sort of stuff, and even as someone that's really not that fond of 3D games that much in general, this was just a really great experience. And I think it's got a really stylish visual aesthetic and some good music to go along with it, so it's kind of got the whole package there, and just can't really recommend it enough. This one also pretty easily to identify, I would say. So I said I like platformers. I also really like roguelike games. Number 16 is Crypt of the Necrodancer. This is a rhythm roguelike. Deliver beatdowns to the beat is the tagline they came up with, and it is pretty accurate. One thing that I think is interesting about this is when I first watched the game, like, I wasn't sure how much I would like it, because it seemed like, just watching it, it seemed kind of stiff. But actually playing the game is really, like, you really get into the flow of moving the character around. And something else that really makes me like this game is the fact that you don't need to have good rhythm to enjoy this game. Like, my rhythm sucks. I put over 100 hours in this game and I still can't reliably keep the beat in Necrodancer, but I can still do well enough because you aren't horribly punished for just missing a beat here or there. And yeah, just a really well executed implementation of kind of that basic concept of, like, what if we have a roguelike except you have very fast turns, and Necrodancer was born, and it's really good. Of course, has some good music, as you might imagine, for a rhythm game as well. Almost decided to go with no song for this one, but once the main part of this song kicks in, I think it is fairly distinct, so we'll give that a chance for people to identify the game by music. Number 15 is Jamestown. Jamestown is a shmup that you can play co-op up to 4 players. And as I mentioned earlier with The Void Rains Upon Her Heart, it kind of hits that nice sweet spot for me where it doesn't feel like too punishingly hard, that it's only for the true experts of the genre, but it wasn't too easy that it felt trivial for me either. so it landed in a really satisfying difficulty spot. You've got a couple of different interesting ships you can choose between, and really what ended up making this stand out the most for me is that no matter how many players you're playing with, the levels and the challenges all adjust appropriately based on the number of players. So the enemy placements and like requirements and all of that stuff for each challenge is different if you're playing with 3 players or 4 players or 1 player. And that really helped the co-op experience a lot. Like I was playing at co-op with some friends, and we were playing it both 3-player and 2-player, and it just like had a natural shift there that worked super well and kept that challenge consistent, and yeah, still stands out as a really really good experience. All right. Number 14 also has some pretty distinctive music, I would say. This is Super Meat Boy. I said it wasn't the last platformer on the list, right? Platformers are definitely a favorite genre of mine, but Super Meat Boy deserves a reasonable amount of credit for that situation. I would say Cave Story back in 2005 kind of first inspired a lot of my love of modern indie games and platformers, but Super Meat Boy really cemented my my current love of platformers. And like I wasn't even sure like how much I would like it when it kind of first came out. Like a friend of mine was getting like really excited about it, and like, yeah, I don't know. That doesn't don't know how much I would like that, but ended up like just really really loving it, and came out at the beginning of this decade, and was awesome. Really a good experience that has a lot of very challenging levels and just a ton of content. Was a lot of fun to speedrun individual levels with it as well. Can anyone recognize that? Or this? It's kind of a playful pick on the music side of this. But I think a fun musical pick. Number 13 is The Witness. This is just a really, really good puzzle game. If you told me I would have a lot of fun and like really love a game that is 50 hours of just staring at line puzzles, like that's the game. 50 hours of line puzzles. That's what you're doing. Somehow it really works. Connect the dots on these line puzzles for 50 hours and manage to be engaging pretty much the entire time. And it is just really good. There's a lot of different twists on the puzzles and the mechanics you end up needing to use, as well as a few other interesting little twists here and there. And there's still some memorable frustrations with the birds, for example. But yeah, overall just a really good puzzle game that just kept going. And it's really rare that there'll be a game that goes that long and still keeps me engaged that entire time. I feel like I'm almost obliged to let this play out. So The Witness is not extremely hard, Echo Far. It is hard. But like it's easier than Baba Is You, it's easier than Snakebird, it's easier than Steven Sausage Roll. It's definitely not the hardest puzzle game out there. Some reasonably distinct piano here, I would say. For number 12, Her Story. This is a game where you are searching through a police database and finding out information about a lady whose husband has been murdered, and you make a lot of interesting discoveries along the way as you piece together the narrative, and it really shines because it is It really shines because it is using the medium of a game to tell the story in a unique way. What would be a somewhat interesting but not nearly as satisfying experience if you just like saw all of the footage just in order becomes an interesting bit of detective work as you're figuring out what words you want to search for, and it's designed in such a way that you're kind of inevitably led to certain key video clips in the game that have certain big realizations and stuff in them that are like, oh wow, and like just like that's a thing, and like that all ends up being really satisfying as you keep getting these little hits of like surprises of how the narrative's going, and gives you a lot to think about afterwards about how everything actually pieces together, and was just a really, really cool game. Number 11. Is sort of 4 games now, but Shovel Knight. Did I mention I like platformers? So Shovel Knight is kind of what I kind of go to as the poster child for a game that isn't really that innovative, but it takes ideas from old games and takes direct inspiration from like your NES classics and like directly improves upon them. So it mostly restricts itself to a original NES palette and sound chip and stuff like that, but just executes those really well. But most importantly, it has really, really good level design, and just ends up being a really fun experience all the way through. Difficulty-wise, it's on the easier side for platformers. Hard enough to still be an interesting challenge, but not so hard that most people can't handle it without too much difficulty. And there are additional campaigns for Plague Knight, Spectre Knight, and King Knight as well, and all of those are also enjoyable, worthwhile experiences, especially Spectre Knight, which is comparable to the original Shovel Knight campaign. There's even a little bit of a emotional kick to the narrative, I felt, as well. Like, it's ostensibly kind of a straightforward save the princess story almost, but it's executed in such a way that it was still really satisfying. And yeah, has some jamming tunes as well. That's a recurring theme on many of these games on this list, but really love Shovel Knight, even though I'm someone that doesn't have like massive love or nostalgia for your Castlevanias and your Mega Mans and stuff. Like, those are games that I like, but I'm not like particularly in love with, but the Shovel Knight just kind of blows them out of the water by taking those ideas and just making them better. Alright, next. Is our second set of honorable mentions. So, I didn't exactly feel like these were proper finished games per se, so I didn't give them more slots, aka this is how we make the list more than 50 entries. But we are giving an honorable mention to Delta Ruin and the fan game Undertale Red. These are both just really thoroughly enjoyable experiences that rely heavily on the existence of another game for them to be as enjoyable as they are. But yeah, Delta Ruin was an incredibly nostalgic experience for me, and I look forward to the full game. And Undertale Red was just all you could really hope for from a fan game that kind of exudes the spirit of its base material while adding some new concepts, and just yeah, was a lot of fun that I really enjoyed. And of course, they both have good music as well. On to number 10. This specific overworld theme here still just brings a smile to my face. This is Terraria. This is a game that kind of came out to be a 2D Minecraft and made itself known as a really powerful and awesome game in its own right. That is just a great co-op experience. One that I've put about 150 hours into, which I know is a small fry number compared to some of the folks out there, but for me that's definitely a lot to put into a single game. And it's also a game that they put out full DLC worthy content releases 3 times already, and they're gonna put out a 4th one. So they just keep adding a huge amount of content to the game, and it just offers a great sense of exploration as you hunt around and find power-ups, and offers some good boss fights and stuff like that, and satisfying kind of traditional progression of get this ore to be able to build the better stuff to get the other ore and things like that. And love the game. But yeah, to me, it's definitely a game that I think is by far best co-op. I don't think I would really enjoy it solo very much, but yeah, I've had a lot of fun with it. Onwards we go. Sounds like a bleak, desolate world, perhaps. Number 9 is Factorio. This is a factory sim, essentially, that you are crash-landed on this alien planet and you're extracting resources to launch a rocket and prep the planet for colonization, essentially, as you battle the natives of the planet that don't really appreciate the fact you're polluting everything. It is a game that has a really satisfying sense of progression, kind of engine building, where you're always solving problems. Sometimes, or most of the time really, those problems are created by your past self, oh, well, I just kind of half-assed this 10 hours ago, now I've got to try to fix this and make it better, and it just, it ends up feeling a lot like a puzzle game in a really fun and satisfying way, and kind of has that addictive, okay, just gotta solve one more problem, okay, now I gotta deal with this before I go on, that really encourages you to keep going. And it also stood out to me a lot that it had really good quality of life features that just make it a smooth playing experience. So unlike some other sim games, it is just kind of smooth to keep playing the game once you learn it. I don't feel like I'm constantly being interrupted by just managing the game itself. Instead, there's lots of neat little features like a context-sensitive select, so you could hover over a building type and press Q, and then you've got that selected automatically instead of having to hunt through your inventory to find it. You got all sorts of things to like automatically pull resources out of miners. You've got the fact you can drag a line of power poles and they'll automatically drop at the correct places, and just a bunch of little features like that that keep making it really satisfying to play as you're building up your engine and like trying to figure out how to go to the next step and deal with all the problems that lies in. Number 8 doesn't have its own song that I found distinct, but it is a really cool puzzle game called Antechamber. Antechamber is kind of part puzzle with just a little, or mostly a puzzle game with a little bit of exploration on the side, as you kind of explore this non-Euclidean world and the secrets therein as you kind of figure out how to progress in a variety of different ways. It also was extra satisfying for me because there were a lot of areas where if you kind of like went places that it doesn't seem like you're supposed to be able to go, like there's little like hidden like dev rooms and stuff that like show off prototypes, and just like there's something there to kind of reward your exploration of the game if you explore it fully like that. And I also really liked kind of just the little in-between bits with like the little notes on the wall that give these little bits of motivational dialogue and stuff in between puzzles. And yeah, just a really neat game that I don't think shines as like a pure puzzle experience, but it's kind of a mixed puzzle experience. I really enjoyed it a lot. Let's see, how quick can you identify this song? Number 7 is V, the letter V 6 times. Hey look, it's another platformer. This is a simple, short, and excellent platformer. It goes for very basic visuals, like harkening back to even pre-NES days, and but they're just clean and well executed. It's got some really jammin' tunes made by Souleye, and was just a really neat platformer. You got a little in-between area where you kind of explore the world, which was a lot of fun too. And there's even like some subtle attention to detail there as well that I appreciate. That like what the character's dialogue is, like that changes based on the order that you rescue the different characters that you're trying to find. And it's got some very memorable optional challenges like Vidi Vidi Vici, which takes the idea of the game, which is that it's a platformer without jumping. Instead, you just reverse gravity. So there's just a tiny block that you can't jump over, and you have to fly through a pile of nonsense spikes up and down to get a little bonus trinket and stuff. And that was always funny and well executed. But the music to this game is still something that I think of as just really motivational. Like I remember a time I was working on a board game design that I was trying to like push out a prototype at the last second. And I just like was playing the VVV music on loop for a while, and yeah, just a really great platforming experience. So this one also don't have a song for, but I chose a song that is related to a bomb, since that seemed appropriate for this game. Number 6 is Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. This is just an utterly fantastic cooperative experience. It is asymmetrical, so one player is disarming the bomb as it's counting down, and one or more other players are the bomb experts with the defusal manual, with the manual to defuse the bomb, and they need to communicate back and forth information in order to figure out how to defuse the bomb, and you're doing this in real time. The manual's kind of obtuse, and yeah, just a really clever cooperative experience that is challenging and fun, and gives you a lot of chance to improve at the game. Like, you can kind of start figuring out your own shorthands to get better, and like methods of improving on the manual, and that's all kind of part of the overall experience. And yeah, not too many experiences as good as that one. You need about one note to recognize this song. Any one that is a regular of the stream or knowledgeable of my content will be unsurprised to find this in the top 5. Number 5 is FTL Faster Than Light. This is my most streamed game, with something around 1,000 hours of this game played on stream. And it's a game that has just fantastic depth, and just a really, really good roguelike repeatable experience. And it's also a rare exception of a game where I originally thought this game was pretty luck-based. Like, when I had played only about 20 hours of this game, I was like, okay, it's pretty fun, but it seems like you're just gonna lose half of the time and there's nothing you can do about it. But eventually I revisited it and found out, like, oh, no, it's actually super skill-based, and there's so many little things you can learn about this game to get better, and you can win nearly all of the time if you're playing well enough, and has some good variety of different ships that all feel and play quite a bit differently, and of course has some lovely music by Ben Prunty as well that nicely shifts between music tracks if you're just exploring or if you're in combat, and yeah, has a lot of good features that really stands up, and can be made even better with balance mods. So, number 4 is One Shot. If I had to just describe this game in a single word, I would probably say charming. It's just a charming narrative-focused adventure about a young child that has been brought into this dying world, and the game knows that you exist, and there's some interesting play around those concepts, and there's some various aspects that are tied in both narratively and to the nature of a game, in some interesting ways, and it has just a really emotionally powerful and touching into the game that was really satisfying, and has some like very memorable lines that I just still think of very fondly. And like I'm almost teared up just now thinking about him. Like it was just a really powerful emotional experience that was really satisfying, and I'm really glad that I had a chance to experience it. Alright, another one that is going to be pretty easy to identify for most people, I imagine. Minecraft is number 3. Has just a wonderful like sense of raw exploration for the sake of exploration that I've never really had to that degree in any other game. It has some really lovely like kind of subdued music, like this song right here, and like Terraria was just a absolutely wonderful cooperative experience where you're doing a lot of stuff working together to just build up a base or explore down some tunnels, and has some memorable moments, like if a creeper suddenly falls from a cavern above you didn't see right in front of your face, and that's just terrifying. And like I said, it just really handles the exploration for the sense of exploration really well. That it's just satisfying to like hop on a boat and sail across the ocean, find a new island, and it just looks really cool. And it was like awesome to just discover that for the sake of it. While like Terraria is really neat to explore because you're finding cool stuff, Minecraft is just really cool to explore for its own right in a lot of ways, and that's also really cool. And I can also say that I think it still lives up really well today. Like they've added a whole bunch of new content and features and stuff over the past decade. And like it was a real treat this year when I replayed it some more co-op again, and was able to explore a lot of that new content for the first time, and discover like buried treasure maps and stuff like that, and that was just a lot of fun to explore, and new enemies that were added to the game, and it like still remains a pretty magical experience that I really enjoyed both almost a decade ago and still today. Alright, I decided to be a little tricksy with the music for this one here. So, a lot of people that love this game may not even recognize this song, but number 2 is Spelunky. So this song is from the original Spelunky, but I've always liked this original theme a little bit better than the new music, so I decided to put that on here. But the new Spelunky came out this decade, and is what people mostly think of, and it controls a lot better than the original Spelunky. But so Spelunky is just a roguelike platformer that was kind of one of the first games that kind of took that the idea of making a roguelike into other genres and executed it really well. And it's just a game that has consistently stayed fun and satisfying. and I really have a hard time praising it enough. Like, it's one of the gold standards of controls in any game, and it is just awesome. Like, and it's my second most streamed game, and it is just silky smooth to play. And I love playing at Pacifist, I love playing at Normal. It's got great procedural generation in the levels. It also really stands out in all the crazy different ways things can interact together. And like how many just little like highlightable moments there are in the game that it does better than any other game. There's just so many crazy ways things can end up interacting in unexpected and surprising ways that it's always fun, and just a high skill cap game that's really good. All right, our final game. Music doesn't seem to be loading. There we go. So this song is still so emotionally resonant. But no surprise to any longtime fans of the stream. Also, I kind of maybe hinted at it with the shirt I was wearing as well. But Undertale is a game that I didn't even expect to like at first. It is a game when it came out, everyone was telling me that, oh, Twinge, you need to play Undertale, and it's like Earthbound. I'm like, but I don't really like Earthbound. Twinge, you gotta play Undertale, it's like Earthbound, but you're not really selling me on this here. And I kind of thought it would be right about an average game experience for me, just like a 6 out of 10. Like, okay, it was fine. That's pretty much what I expected coming in, and it is a game that still took some time to truly grow on me. Like, as I played through my first playthrough of the game, like, it was like, oh, that was good. That was better than I expected. I enjoyed that. Is pretty much where I landed. Like, okay, that was pretty cool. And then over time, like, I started watching some other people play through the game themselves a little bit, and then eventually I was convinced to do a second playthrough of the game, and I remember being told that more would change than I expected, and that was certainly the case. In more ways than one, more changed on the second playthrough than I expected, and it just here's where I'm going to overhype the game and say that Undertale showed me that games can be magical again, basically, you know? Like, it is not since I played Cave Story in 2005 have I developed this kind of just passion for a game that like, I just want to like shout out, like, everybody needs to play this. This is the best thing ever. Like, I love this so much. Like, I just I don't usually get that impassioned about things. Even FTL that I've played 1,000 hours of, I don't get that kind of passion about at all. But Undertale was just a truly magical experience for me, and part of that was definitely the fact that like, I streamed the experience with everybody watching, and I was able to watch so many other people play through at the same time after I played through. I get to see other people experience the game for the first time, and every time I watched someone play the game, I would see something new that I had never seen before, and it just has an attention to detail that is unrivaled by any other game. Like the amount of little things that you can do in the game that most people will never do, that the game still acknowledges and like recognizes and responds to, even though like less than 0.1% of players will ever see that content. It being something I really love in games, it executed that better than anything else. And then on top of that, it had gameplay that I found really satisfying. And on top of that, it had music that is just non-stop awesome track after awesome track. And on top of that, it had a really powerful, emotionally resonant story that just all combines together to be my favorite game. If you asked me before I played Undertale if I like had a standout favorite game, I wouldn't have had a clear answer. Like, I had important games in my life like Cave Story and Final Fantasy VI and Total Annihilation and stuff, but Undertale ended up standing out more than even those wonderful experiences. And I look forward to being this touched by a video game again in maybe another 5 years. And you can probably hear in my voice, like even talking about it passionately is like making me tear up. Like it's that strong for me. And as far as a recommendation goes to like, it's easy for people to overhype the game, and some people go into it having expectations too high, but I'll simply say that, like, it's an experience that is worth your time. It doesn't need to be any more than that. It might only be like a good, worthwhile experience, but I think for the vast majority of people, it's at least worth your time to play, and that's all it needs to be. If you're lucky, it'll be something more like it was for me, but if it's not, that's okay too.